Championship Sunday is upon us. It's week 16 of the Occupy Fantasy season long podcast. And for those of you lucky enough, you're playing for all the marbles this weekend.
Yeah, and judging by our tweet that asked for advice this week, there may not be that many of our followers that are in the championship. So if you are, congrats. And if you're not, hey, you can still listen and get some advice on how to, if you were here, what you would have done.
Right, maybe next year, right? You never know. And it is a fun time of the year where you're kind of faced with tough decisions, right? Do you stick with guys that got you here, or do you kind of jump on the bandwagon with some of these recent, let's say, roster plugins? And a lot of times folks get caught up in what got them there. And we're here to kind of convince you otherwise and how you have to really reassess the field and make the best decisions possible this week in a vacuum.
Yeah, and honestly, this should be your most active week probably, because if you think about it, if you're not starting someone, there's no reason for them to be on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
So injured players, super backups, second quarterbacks, like you need to get rid of these guys and just churn through roster spots to give yourself possibilities because it's only Wednesday, things can happen, and while things may not happen, you have to be
Sure.
prepared.
Right. You want your bench to be built of players that can potentially add value for you this weekend or take away from what your opponent can do this weekend. Backup quarterbacks that you're not considering, backup defenses. I mean, even, guys that you've been riding all year, and let's say Chris Godwin, right?
Yep.
He pulled his hammy. At this point, obviously, don't think he's going to play. Josh Jacobs looks like he's going to be ruled out. So yeah, you got to set yourself up to just play this 1 week.
Yeah, it's almost like DFS in a sense, right? Just get your best
Mm-hmm.
guys in the lineup. But you made a good point about not only building your roster for yourself, but blocking your opponent too. If your opponent has a shaky tight end situation, or he's left with Dalvin Cook, even if you don't need a running back,
Right.
you should be picking up some of these guys that we're about to talk about as a top pickup this week.
100%. So, yeah, let's talk about those guys. There are a number of folks, primarily, I think, at the running back position that we need to just make note of. So, we saw what Mike Boone did last week, scored 2 touchdowns. We expected Madison, or he expected to play last week, but he didn't. So, when Dalvin got banged up, he was the go to guy. Now, the tough thing about this Vikings situation is they do play on Monday night, and unless you have the stable backfield, it might be tough waiting to make a decision.
Yeah, hopefully we get some information here soon, but or at least by Friday or Sunday morning. But Mike Boone, if you've ever played preseason DFS, this guy's been one of the most explosive electric running backs in the league. And whenever he gets a chance to touch the ball, it's exciting. So to see him come in last week, get carries, and actually do and get production with it, it really wasn't unexpected. I mean, this dude's a talented running back. And now Cook, it sounds like he'll be out the last 2 games of the regular season. Alexander Madison didn't practice all week with an ankle sprain. I think it's a high ankle sprain. So it would be
Yeah,
surprising to see him come back. So either way, Boone, if you need a running back or your opponent has Dalvin Cook, I mean, this is a guy you should pick up because if we get word that
definitely
he's
pick
starting,
up
he's going to be a top play.
for sure. Definitely pick him up. I picked him up this morning, this past waivers, and like I said, the Monday night kind of delay in decision can very well hurt, but maybe there's a chance by Friday we just know who's ruled in or out, or
Yep.
Saturday, right? That's what you're hoping for. But something that we expect to get a clearer picture on before, it does look like Josh Jacobs will be ruled out. I don't know 100% for sure, but it's trending that way. And that makes DeAndre Washington a very just valid play
Yeah, about maybe a couple minutes before we started recording, he was officially ruled out by John
officially.
Gruden. So Josh Jacobs is out for Sunday and probably Week 17 too. And
Mm-hmm.
so DeAndre Washington will get the start. He got about 2/3 of the touches when Jacobs missed a couple of weeks ago, and he's in a good spot. And if you're stuck at the running back position or your opponent had Jacobs, I mean, this is a guy you got to pick up because starting running backs, especially ones that get 2/3 of the touches, are still tough to come by this time of year.
100%. That's the spot I'm in right now. All year I've played um, I played receivers at the flex spot, right? I've been running two running backs, but this week I picked up. Well, I had DeAndre Washington. I just picked up Mike Boone, and one of these guys is going to get the plug and play. I think if we get clarity on Boone before the weekend, then I think I'll go with him. But if it's murky, I'm going to go with DeAndre Washington. Once again, these are guys that a couple of weeks ago probably had no business on anyone's roster, but at this point, they can make all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, some of the guys that we'll talk about, even some of the questions we've received, it's just really funny to think about, back in August doing your draft that you would never think these guys would be guys you're starting your championship week, but
Mm-hmm.
here we are.
So, on Johnson, he has returned to practice, and there's a chance that he can uh, be on the field Sunday. We know this Detroit offense has been anemic, and I mean, is it just even if he was to play, is it just way too risky of a situation?
It probably is, but again, this is just the perfect scenario where you pick a guy up who was a top 3 round pick in August that could play this week. You may not play him, you might not, but you pick him up, and if we get word that on Johnson is going to start and play a significant role, then you have a top 24 running back. However, he's not on the practice squad, and Detroit really only likes guys who are on the practice squad to call them up and then give them like 20 carries. So I don't know if
Mhm.
on fits the bill this week.
Yeah, seriously though. But yeah, I think the key thing is going to be to get a very specific update, right? Even if
Yep.
he's active, a little scary, but if they expect him to play and the beat is expect him to get a bulk of the touches, then that changes it. And once again, I don't like him as much as the two guys we mentioned,
Right.
but still, it's probably better having him on your bench than someone that simply is not going to add any value for you this week.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I like the other two guys a lot better too, but again, it's better than a wasted spot.
So we saw what happened to Chris Godwin, who
Mm.
I mean, I want to give him a big thank you, a big salute. What an amazing season, incredible ceiling going forward, and he'll be out with the hamstring injury. Mike Evans is on IR, and we saw Brashad Perryman really step on the scene. But now with Godwin out, Scotty Miller out, who are these other names? I mean, Justin Watson. Does OJ Howard and Cameron Brate get a bump at the tight end position? What do you make? I mean, we heard Bruce Arians talk about the running backs being more involved in the passing game, but where do you see Winston's volume going towards?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so Perriman's going to be the number one, and it's crazy to see him ranked as a top 12 receiver this week.
It's
Justin
insane.
Watson should be an every down receiver, so I think if you're in a pinch, you can use him as well. Jameis came out and said that he talked to OJ Howard and Cameron Brate this week. Is like, hey, all the receivers are hurt. We're going to feed you guys the ball. But then Arians, I imagine a little forward looking because they're matched with Houston this week. Houston gives up a ton of receptions to running backs. Maybe he saw
Mm-hmm.
that and said, hey, we're going to get the running backs involved this week. So yeah, I think Perriman's the top play here, then probably OJ Howard next, and then Watson. So we'll see. But I mean, it's going to be a high volume passing game. I don't think it's crazy to start any of these guys.
Right. So help me kind of rank them. Let's say half point PPR, not including Perryman, who's obviously wide receiver one this week. But between, let's say you have a flex spot, right, between Justin Watson, between Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, and I'll even throw in Peyton Barber as an option, who's probably sitting there, and you might think, even though he hasn't been the receiving back, could get a spike. How would you rank those four guys?
Yeah, probably Watson first for me, then Howard, then Brate, and then the running backs. Just
Mm-hmm.
because they legit could be three guys getting
Yeah.
significant playing time. So I would prefer the receivers and tight ends over them. So
Got it. No, that's right about how I feel. Let's talk about Danny Amendola and the crazy volume he got. Another guy I picked up, but I don't know if I'm going to start him this week. But Marvin Jones on IR, and the way the coverage tilted towards Kenny Galladay, and we do expect Chris Harris to probably shadow Kenny Galladay this week. Do you see an opportunity for Amendola to, if not like repeat what he did last week? He won't score two touchdowns, I doubt it, but maybe get 13 targets.
Yeah, I mean last week just insane usage. 13 targets, 138 air yards, which was impressive to me. Went for 8 for 102. I'm actually starting him in my dynasty league final because I had Godwin, Antonio
Mm.
Brown, Jesus. So yeah, I'm starting Amendola this week too, and I think I believe Chris Harris will shadow Kenny Galladay in this matchup, which should be more looks for Amendola. So I like him a lot this week. He's, if you listen to our DFS podcast, he's one of our underperforming receivers. So
Mm.
those guys apply for season-long leagues too, and I think
Yeah.
he's a good play this week.
Yeah, I mean, the argument checks out. I think he is one of the, once again, I think he is more of a high floor guy
Yep.
than high ceiling in a situation like this. So it depends what you need, what you're looking for. If you need upside, it's great. Yeah, he scored 2 touchdowns last week, but and even though he's on the underperforming list, just seeing the type of receiver we've gotten. He is more of that Julian Edelman type, right? Where you expect him to get looks in the slot that set him up for high volume in receptions. But I don't know. He doesn't seem like a guy that's going to get another 2 touchdown game.
He did he didn't score last week, did he?
I thought he scored 2 touchdowns. Am I just talking out of my ass?
Yeah, I think you made that up because
What?
yeah, he was not in the end zone last week.
Holy smokes!
Yeah,
What
I think
this must.
you're just foreshadowing because this week he's going to score 2 touchdowns.
Damn. All
So
right.
yeah,
Wait. That changes absolutely everything.
yeah,
No, my argument.
you're just coming back from the future. You're talking about the Week 16
Wow.
game where he scored 2 touchdowns.
Now my mind is blown because I went from picking up Broncos defense to now I got to really consider starting Danny Amendola. But no, you're right. He didn't score. He had 13 targets, and in the last 3 weeks, he's had a total of 31 targets. I guess my concern is just like if he was to only get 8, 9 targets, kind of the dud that can come with that. But
Sure.
I mean, here you are. So Steven Sims, 11 targets for the Skins last week. He's been pretty impressive, man. I think he's definitely in the future plans. Do you see him as a potential kind of a boom candidate this week?
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that like most people don't even know who he is, right? Just
Yeah.
out of nowhere, 11 targets. But an electric dude had a couple long touchdowns this year, whether it's on special teams or on end arounds. So seeing him get 11 targets, Trey Quinn is out, Paul Richardson's out, so it's really just all the young guys getting reps for Washington. And if you're in a desperate situation, all these guys we mentioned already are taken into deep league. I mean, Steven Sims is a guy. Hey, if you're short at receiver, you had Godwin, whatever it may be. Here's a guy you can pick up that may get 7+ targets, which is hard to ask for at this time of year.
I think so too. So let's talk about some streaming quarterbacks. I think I'm rolling with Fitzpatrick, but there are some other guys, including Andy Dalton against the Dolphins. Um, who else would you put on the radar?
I would go with both those guys before this next guy I mentioned, and that's Gardner Minshew, just because Jacksonville's been so inept, just on offense
Yeah.
the last, I don't know, 10 weeks. So it does have a good matchup with Atlanta, but
Hmm.
I would much rather start.
Jimmy G had that last week at home, right? And we saw what that kind of turned into.
Yeah, right. I don't. Yeah, that was a weird. For the record, I do like Atlanta's defense this week in streaming defenses, but
I think so.
yeah, I don't know who else you could even start. It's pretty
Here's
tough.
one guy I want to throw out there because he still is who he is, a gunslinger. Philip Rivers.
True. True. Against Oakland, Oakland kind of shutting everyone down. That game, I think the Chargers opened as a 4.5 point favorite. It's now up to 7.5 with some of
Mhm.
the guys that Oakland's resting. So I can
Yeah.
see that the last quote unquote home game for the Chargers. So
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Like, do you think that he's playable over a Fitzpatrick? I'm pretty much asking you to convince me that I should do that.
nah, I would go with Fitzpatrick. I
That's
mean,
what I think.
yeah, Lamar
The
Fitzpatrick.
rushing floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Man, if it's for a guy that went to Harvard, Fitzpatrick sure plays like he doesn't know about like CTE or like
Nah, man.
the
I mean,
damage.
to be 3-12 or whatever they are, and him just diving headfirst into defenders makes no
It's
sense.
amazing. It's so fun to watch. Like I laugh every time. I'm like, holy shit, this guy is actually playing like a video game. Like he
He is,
doesn't
for sure.
head down, boom, like to make a point. So,
Just getting
um,
up, getting up, screaming too. It's like, yo, you're psycho.
but that's what we want in Championship Sunday. So bring that energy in a little revenge game
Hell
against the
yeah.
Bengals. What about streaming defenses? I mentioned I picked up the Broncos. I think you said, well, the Falcons were a good option against the Jags. What else piques your interest?
What about the Jets against Pittsburgh? Greg Williams blitzing defense against Duck Hodges, who is really not much better than Mason Rudolph. And then
Yeah,
the Colts against Carolina. I like the Will Greer coming out of college. He's going to get the start for Carolina finally after Kyle Allen's been imploding for the past 5 or 6 weeks. But Will Greer was Pro Football Focus's worst graded quarterback in the preseason. Maybe this is why it's taken them so long to stick him in there because he just hasn't shown what they
yeah,
thought. But either way, the Colts as near touchdown home favorites is a great spot for a defense.
yeah. I think so too. So a couple of good options here, and
Yeah,
not teams that I mean outside the Steelers. Not these aren't games or teams where I think folks have been like hogging these defenses. So
right.
you could probably pick them up after waivers clear, considering Championship Sunday. Hopefully, there's only two people active in the league, right? And not like seven owners trying to get their stake on the streaming defense for a fourth place matchup.
Which I don't know why that's even a thing. That should
Yeah,
if you're a commissioner, get that shit out of here.
right. Ground rules should be everyone plays from week 1 to week 14, final week of the season. I don't care if you're out, you should be setting a lineup trying to beat your opponent.
Yeah,
But once playoffs start, if you're not in it, sit your ass down, shut it down. If you lose in the playoffs, I don't care if it's a third place game. Hopefully, your league doesn't incentivize a winner of a
right.
third place matchup because that's
Exactly.
when you get these headaches, right?
Yep.
But yeah, feel free to ask us any advice on what is kosher and not as far as setting these rules because we are very opinionated on these sort of things.
That's for sure. That is for sure.
Yeah, let's jump into some of these questions. Not many, which hey, maybe next year we'll have more. But
Listen to us
uh,
next time.
yeah, yeah. So Tannehill or Kyler Murray?
This is tough. I think you have to start. I think you have to start Kyler. I like him this week in
Yeah.
Seattle. Highest total game of the week.
Hmm.
Tough matchup for Tannehill, and just he can't continue throwing 2 touchdowns, rushing for one on like 25 attempts. So I'm going with Kyler.
We got Rashad Perryman, Robert Woods, or Mike Will.
This is
Half
nuts.
point PPR. Yeah, this is tough, but
You got to go
I know what you're
Perriman.
gonna say.
You
Yeah,
got you got
I
to go
think so.
Perriman. Yeah.
I mean, no Godwin, no Mike Evans. The volume is surely going to be there, and Robert Woods, who I think will bounce back this week after laying a egg, pretty much a dud last week. Still, Perryman's floor and upside, it's just too much to pass up on. So, um, definitely want to go for him.
Yeah, agree. All right, Double Eagles. Our boy Nick, longtime listener, says, all right, half point PPR. It's an 8-team league, so it's going to be a tough question. You have to pick 3 of these guys: Amari, Stephon Diggs, Odell Beckham, Christian Kirk, Brashad Perriman, or Scary Terry.
It's a tough one here. I mean, if you have to pick three, first of all, I mean, look, it's an 8-team league, but chances are one of these guys you're going to make the wrong decision on.
Yeah.
So,
This is too tough.
um, but
For me personally, I wouldn't start Amari Cooper. Some of
I
the
know I
comments
hate
some of the comments we've gotten today
on
about
Dak.
his shoulder really scares me off that entire offense.
See, this is what's kind of frustrating me because last week I went with Amari Cooper because I had no choice, right?
Right.
Like, but in hindsight, oh man, like I should have. It didn't end up costing me, but I should have benched him, right? And then this week with this Dak Prescott news, here I am, but I just can't get myself to do it. He is just the number one receiver in a good passing offense. He has all the skill in the world, and he has too much of a slate breaking kind of, or I call it slate, but like, he has, there's too much chances of him being a top five receiver any given week for me to bench when I know the matchup's solid. Unless Dak, we get some word that he can't go, and even then, I'm still probably
I think in
um
your situation, yeah, you have to. But if you're in Nick's situation with all these guys, do you still
other
have to start him?
options. That's the thing, right? Because his situation is as great as it is on paper with like Perryman. You look at like Scary Terry, right? He could still very well lay a dud like
True.
that. I mean, we even like against Green Bay, if he didn't score that touchdown, it's still the Redskins' passing offense, which isn't really impressive. You got Odell and Diggs on teams that are, I mean, like the Vikings are a run first team, right? And there have been games where we've seen Diggs just not be a factor, or he
Yeah, true.
catches like two deep balls, and other than that, like the volume's not there. So it's a tough call. I think you got to go with Perryman, Cooper, and then ultimately one of these three between. I can rule out Scary Terry,
Yeah.
just and either way, you're still looking at a um, good group. I can't answer it. You're gonna have to answer it for me.
Yeah, it's tough. I would go definitely Perriman, which is absolutely nuts that he's the number one of this group.
Yeah.
Christian Kirk I would go with in a high total game, and then it's between Diggs and Odell for me, and I'd probably lean
Hmm.
Diggs just for safety reasons.
Yeah.
That's
No, yeah, you never know. Odell might say, "Come get me again this week.
all
Come
right.
get me out of this fantasy team."
Yeah, right. Okay.
But
All right. We did get some offline questions to people who just message us personally or however it may be. All right. Walid, pick two of these running backs: Leonard Fournette against
mm,
the Falcons, Marlon Mack at home against the Panthers, Mike Boone Monday night. Let's just assume Mike Boone's starting. Let's for the sake of this argument, Mike Boone's starting,
yeah.
and Miles Sanders against the Cowboys. Pick two.
So factors that matter is number one, you're starting Fournette no matter what.
Yep.
Like you don't bench him. The volume. I mean, the guy that plays 99% of snaps. I don't care how bad his team is.
Yeah.
Um, Now the debate for me is really because even assuming like I can't make that assumption, but fine. If he was to play that and those other, or I'm sorry, if Cook and Madison are out and Boone plays, then I will start Boone there, right?
Sure.
But without knowing that, and we'll assume it's half point PPR. It comes down to either Marlon Mack or Miles Sanders for me, and I think Marlon Mack home favorites against a team like the Panthers is where you go.
Yep. Literally the worst run defense in the league. By metrics or by film, they're just a terrible run defense. So yeah, I think max number two of Boone is not starting.
So honestly, reverse logic, right? From what we were saying, stick with guys that got you there and that you drafted early.
Yep, exactly. All right, receivers, pick three. So but you have to bench one of these guys. Keenan, Scary Terry, Devontae Parker, Will Fuller.
I'm going to bench Will Fuller. I hate doing it.
He's popping off for 3 touchdowns against Tampa
Right.
too.
So I'd bench. Okay, here's once again, depending on your matchup. If you need upside, then you start Will Fuller. If not, you bench Scary Terry. But between Devontae Parker and Keenan Allen, I feel comfortable playing both of those guys.
Agree. Yeah, definitely Keenan, definitely Devontae. It's between McLaurin and Fuller for me too. So
Hmm. Austin Hooper and Jacob Hollister. Got to go with Hooper.
I think so too, but it's funny because the way this question was asked was that the person, clarified that Hollister is playing Arizona, just in case we didn't know that, just
Yeah,
to kind of
yeah,
influence our decision. So, um, yeah, I think you still have to go Hooper. This is close though. It's close for me because Hooper's
yeah.
volume hasn't been the same since he's returned.
I think so. I think it's close, but yeah, Hooper is. I think he is with all these guys out for the Falcons. Hooper seems to kind of be in line to have a game. Like Julio, how many targets did Julio Jones have last week?
I like Julio
Like
Jones a
20.
lot. He had 20.
Yeah. So, I think Hooper might get a few more. And honestly, if Hooper catches that touchdown at the end, then everything's different for everyone. And we don't want to talk about it, but he very well could have, right?
Right, for
And
sure.
had a good stat line. Tyler Boyd or Perryman.
I actually like Boyd.
Right.
I know we've talked about Perriman a lot on this episode, but I think Boyd's volume and matchup is a safe.
Safer
I
play.
like Boyd a lot.
Yeah, which is he's also wide receiver one this week against the Dolphins.
Yep.
And then I imagine we're talking DeAndre Washington or Le'Veon Bell.
Yep. DeAndre Washington or Le'Veon Bell. I think I would start DeAndre Washington.
Yeah, I mean it's like the revenge game works both ways here, right? For Le'Veon, it's like are
So
the
true.
Steelers fired up? Like we're gonna bottle this guy up, or is it vice versa? Le'Veon Bell, who gets the edge?
I didn't
But
even think about that. But oh shit,
yeah,
that kind of changes
right.
things.
It does right, but no, I think DeAndre Washington. I mean, Le'Veon Bell, the volume, even when it's there, he's given like it's just been such an anemic offense running the ball. And it's hard to see. Who knows though? They'll probably itch to give him an extra look or two inside the 3 yard line, but who knows if they'll get down there.
That's true too. I don't know if Adam Gase cares about that, but maybe he does because he
Yeah,
did give Le'Veon a ton of carries after he bitched about it last week, even though they were down 30 points in the fourth quarter.
you
So
just never know with Gase.
you never do.
Never know. But all right, guys, good luck. Week 16. This is it. If you got here, don't rest on your laurels. Treat it as a whole new season and set yourself up for success.
Yep. This will be the last season long edition of the Occupy Fantasy Football podcast until next season. So it's been a pleasure. We'll still have the DFS episode through the playoffs this week as well. And then obviously check us out at Occupy Fantasy on Twitter, occupyfantasy.com for all the other tons of content that we're doing.
Awesome. All right, guys, good luck. We'll see you soon.